After a decade of saving, we moved to our dream duplex, only to face Karen's chaos. A party, a fence, and a surprise rental takeover. Just joking. Karen is extremely difficult, but prepare yourselves because here comes my story. My husband and I are in our late 30s and do not have children. Some individuals in the child-free community suggested I share our experience here as well, so enjoy our journey. My husband and I had been saving for nearly 10 years to relocate to a tropical paradise. About 2 years ago, we decided to take the plunge and move to our ideal location. Housing costs are exceptionally high here, comparable to Hawaii, so we could only afford half of a duplex. It is lovely and situated by the water, complete with space for our boat. Unfortunately, Karen, her boyfriend Billy Bob, and her 3 children reside in the other unit. Background. At one point, we came here for a week at a time, but we now live here year-round. The entire duplex was owned by an elderly gentleman who rented both sides. The 2 sides were vastly different. One side featured 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, while the other had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. We purchased the 5-bedroom side. On our portion of the property, we have 90% of the backyard, a gazebo, and dockage, approximately 150 since it is on a corner. The other side has a small backyard, a patio, and perhaps 15 of dockage. The rental agreements specify that tenants have the right to their designated backyards, but there were no fences or barriers, so all renters shared the entire backyard. After we purchased the property, Karen immediately attempted to assert that they expected to maintain that privilege. I informed her that if she asked politely, we would try to accommodate her. She interpreted this as permission to use our backyard whenever she wished. Incident at the party. One afternoon, my husband and I were enjoying drinks outside when a delivery truck arrived to set up a large inflatable structure in our backyard. I asked Karen what she was doing, and she informed me it was for her child's birthday. She even had the audacity to declare it a family and friends-only gathering, insisting that we stay inside. Not wanting to be overly rude and ruin a little girl's celebration, I told Karen that after this, she would have no access to our backyard, period. Karen shrugged and continued her preparations for the party. During the celebration, a drunken adult stumbled into our house, shocking us all. I informed him that Karen lived on the other side, and he replied, "Oh, Karen said she owned the whole property and that we could use whichever bathroom was available." I directed him to Karen's bathroom, and shortly after, she stormed into our house, shouting about how we had embarrassed her in front of her friends and how selfish we were for not allowing her to use even one bathroom. She claimed we didn't deserve so much space with just the 2 of us. I told Karen to leave my house immediately or I would call the police. She finally exited, and the party concluded soon thereafter. Backyard renovation. After the party incident, we decided it was necessary to clearly define our backyard by constructing a fence. While we were investing money into the project, we also opted to enhance the patio, add a fire pit, and create an outdoor kitchen. When the contractor was on site, Karen came over to investigate. Since the fence would be the final addition, I kept my explanations vague and focused on the patio improvements. I could see the delight on her face, as she believed that what belonged to us was also hers. When the workers began constructing the fence, Karen emerged, vociferously demanding that the work halt. I stepped outside, instructed the workers to continue, and told Karen to mind her own business. In classic Karen fashion, she called the police. What happened next was humorous for me, as I explained to the officer that we were building a fence on our property, and that the landlord, of whom Karen was not, was aware of it. When the officer delivered a firm reprimand to Karen, I thought her head might explode. She returned to her home and violently slammed the sliding door, making it sound as if something had cracked. We completed our fence, and I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, it was not. The boat incident one day, Billy Bob entered the picture and quickly proved to be as awful a neighbor as Karen. He would toss cigarette butts and empty beer cans over our fence as a way of disrespecting his woman. I never thought paradise could harbor such low-class individuals, but Billy Bob perfectly embodied that stereotype. Billy Bob owns a boat, a 30 fishing boat, to be precise. Naturally, his side of the duplex only has 15 of dockage. Since we have significantly more dockage and only one boat, we lease out the additional spaces on a month-to-month basis. there is a flow of renters, so if we do not receive rent by the end of the month and a boat disappears, we think nothing of it. We had a renter who docked their boat at the property line, but Billy Bob wanted to park his boat in that area. Karen and Billy Bob impersonated us, since we were out of town, informed the renters they needed to leave by the end of the month, and then positioned Billy Bob's boat on the dock. I only discovered what had transpired weeks later when the renter left a negative review on the rental platform we use. They claimed we were rude and had gone back on our verbal promise to allow them to stay for 3 more months. I wondered, what is going on? After a phone call, it quickly dawned on me. I contacted the authorities, who told Karen and Billy Bob that they needed to remove their boat or it would be towed, or something equivalent. Karen and Billy Bob began shouting that the boat was entirely on their property, which it was not. Then argued that no one could own the water, true, but a seawall is titled, that we were liars, and at one point, Billy Bob struck a police officer and was taken to jail. I felt sorry for the officers, so I brought them snacks the next day with a note apologizing for the neighborly drama. Ultimately, I won my small claims case against them for lost rental income, but of course, I have yet to see a cent. I eventually convinced the dock renters to return and offered them a few months free as compensation. Final payback, if you have made it this far, congratulations. Prepare for a delightful twist of fate. With the declining market, we were contemplating how to handle our savings when a perfect opportunity presented itself. The landlord, who owned both properties, was in urgent need of cash and was tired of managing the property from 2,000 miles away, as Karen had been pestering him weekly about every little issue. His only condition was that we allow the poor single mother who had been his tenant for 8 years to fulfill her lease, which expires in July. Since we had the cash and could now control our neighbors, we jumped on this chance. Because we did not require a realtor or mortgage, and an inspection had recently occurred for the old landlord to refinance, the deal closed in just under 2 weeks. Karen was aware of a change in ownership. We registered the property under an LLC, but she did not know who the new owners were until just 8 days ago. I approached Karen's home and knocked on the door. When she answered with, "What do you want?" I smiled, handed her our landlord information, and sweetly reminded her that rent was due by Friday. I suggested that she could simply give me the check if it was more convenient. I have always heard about people's faces going pale, but this was the first time I witnessed it firsthand. I told Karen that we would honor her lease until the end of July, but after that, she would need to make arrangements to relocate, as we intended to remodel before the new tenants moved in. Goodbye. Edit: many individuals misunderstood the introduction. Let us refer to our side of the duplex as duplex OP. The other unit will be duplex Karen. We purchased duplex OP. Once we acquired it, duplex OP was no longer a rental. Both duplex OP and duplex Karen were sold separately, but we only had the financing to buy duplex OP. Duplex Karen is still a rental as it has never been sold. Now we own both duplex OP and duplex Karen. Duplex Karen remains a rental. Duplex OP is still not a rental. When we made improvements to duplex OP, it was ours and not subject to rental status. Update 1: there's not much to share, folks. Karen and her family's lease is not up until the end of July. Rent has been consistently paid. As far as I know, she does not have a new residence lined up. We have provided her with a 30-day notice that we will not be renewing the lease. We also offered in writing to prorate July and waive the termination fee if they wish to vacate before the lease concluded. Aside from the frequent loud parties and having to call the authorities because the children were launching fireworks at our boat, not much has deviated from the status quo. Update 2 August 2020. To summarize, Karen and her family are still occupying the unit without paying rent. They were issued an eviction notice, but due to COVID-related issues, we cannot take further action at this time. At least Karen and Billy Bob had a massive argument that resulted in him being arrested, and he has not returned. Our attorney has informed us that once some regulations are lifted in September, we can have the police remove them from the property that same day, as we have already filed for eviction. It has been a chaotic situation. Karen is acting obnoxiously self-satisfied. She has been testing her limits and frequently coming over to our side of the property. A conversation with the police clarified the boundaries, but she is still playing loud music and littering everywhere. We were eager to move our aging parents in after a quick renovation, as my father requires shoulder surgery and my mother now uses a walker. They need additional care, and it has become increasingly difficult to commute 2 hours each day to assist them. Our parents desire their own space, however, and do not want to reside on our side with us. My husband and I are striving to remain patient and avoid escalating tensions with Karen, but we are both feeling drained. The situation is quite unfortunate. Update 3 Deck 2020 life can certainly be unpredictable. Karen is still here. Since we were unable to evict her, my partner has temporarily stayed with their parents so they can receive the care and surgery they need. They are recovering well, which is wonderful. Here's the bizarre part. In October, Karen's mother, Susan, moved in with her after Susan's landlord opted not to renew her lease. Susan is a blessing. Susan was appalled by Karen's and the children's behavior. She is strong-willed and has been putting everything in order, both metaphorically and literally. The children are behaving much better, and Karen has been sulking around like a petulant child. Susan and I enjoy drinks together every few days in the backyard. We bake together on weekends, too. For Thanksgiving and Christmas, since no one traveled during the holidays, we prepared a large meal and set it up outside with some backyard games. It was a delightful time, and even Karen was being agreeable. I attempted to reassure Susan that she should not worry about rent until they found a new place, but she insisted on paying. I understated the rental amount so that it only covers half, which merely accounts for taxes and insurance. We created a new month-to-month lease agreement. Susan hopes to eventually return home and take her daughter with her. I believe Karen is also prepared for a change, but with COVID, it may take some time. For now, things are quite pleasant, so I'm not rushing them to leave. Story 2. We bought edibles, misread the label, and ended up consuming 264 mg THC. Total chaos ensued, including multiple vomit cups. Mandatory note, this occurred approximately a month ago, right after Thanksgiving in the United States. Also, I am using a throwaway account because this situation is quite embarrassing, and I prefer it remains untraceable to my main account. My wife, 46, and I, 48, visited family out of state for Thanksgiving. After the holiday, we headed north to see one of our daughters, 21, who had recently relocated to the area for her first professional job. We arrived while she was still at work and intended to explore the town while waiting for her to finish and join us for dinner. During our exploration, we found a cannabis shop. It is legal for recreational use in this state, and decided to check it out. To provide some context, my wife was raised in a very progressive family. Her parents participated in Woodstock, embodying that liberal ethos. They were open-minded about creating a safe environment for their children and their friends to experiment with marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, and other substances. Conversely, I grew up in a rather conservative household where topics like alcohol and drugs were rarely discussed. My mother never consumed alcohol in front of us as children, and I can recall only one instance of my father having a beer in front of me. I didn't try alcohol until I was nearly 30, and it has only been in the past year that I asked my wife to guide me into the realm of THC and CBD. It is legally prescribed for us where we reside, and both of us hold medical cards. This background illustrates that my wife possesses a wealth of experience in this area, while I do not. As we entered the shop, we noted that it was spacious and tidy, with a wide selection available. We requested the clerk to show us some edibles. He appeared puzzled and sought clarification. "You know, edibles, like gummies, etc.," he replied. "Oh, I see," and explained that he had recently relocated from abroad to assist his brother with the shop and had never encountered that terminology before. He mentioned that he was not a native speaker of English. No problem, we thought. Perhaps it's simply a matter of regional vernacular. We say edibles, you say gummies. He directed us to a glass display case filled with various items pre-rolls, loose leaf, gummies, dabs, mushrooms, and more. The selection was quite overwhelming. As we perused, he offered us the chance to try some vape pens with sample cartridges, and we accepted. We took a puff from 3 different samples while examining the display. Ultimately, we purchased 2 vape pens and a package of 2 8 mg grape-flavored edibles. Since we had already sampled the 3 hits from the pens, we decided to save the purchased items for later in the weekend. The following day, we spent the entire day with our daughter, shopping for decorations to help her personalize her new apartment. Around 5 p.m., she indicated she needed a break and wanted to call her girlfriend. My wife and I opted to give her some privacy for a couple of hours and ventured out to explore the town until 7 p.m. The town was hosting a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in the square, and the shops were expected to be open late as a result, so we anticipated plenty of activities. This seemed like an ideal moment to consume the edibles. An 8 mg dose is typical for us and would provide a mild buzz while we strolled about. About 45 minutes into our exploration, I began to feel the effects, particularly in a quirky oddities market that surrounded us with unusual taxidermy, vintage medical photographs, and the like. We decided to find something to eat and chose an old diner we had spotted earlier, hoping it would be either a hidden gem or a restaurant with historical charm. It turned out to be the latter, filled with older locals discussing local politics and exchanging neighborhood gossip. They consistently came and went, switching tables and forming new groups, classic small-town behavior. It was charming and amusing to observe. The food was mediocre, and the coffee was subpar, but it was inexpensive and served quickly. I speculated that the only reason they could maintain such low prices was that the elderly couple who ran the counter were the original owners, relying on one another to keep the establishment afloat. While enjoying our meal, I felt my high peak at that moment. Typically, I experience a sharp decline after reaching that point, but time seemed to slow, and the conversations around me thrummed in my ears. I was frequently caught off guard by a couple outside in a car, mistakenly thinking they were staring at us, only to realize it was our reflection in the diner's window aligning perfectly with the vehicle parked outside. My wife was getting restless. She loves walking when high, and I could tell she was eager to leave the diner. I was considering the same, but I informed her that I needed a few more minutes as my legs felt heavy, almost immobile, and I feared I might collapse if I attempted to get up. I had tried moving them a couple of times, but they felt like dead weight. So we lingered a bit longer, my thoughts muddled, simply listening to the conversations swirling around us, which all blended into a cacophony that was hard to decipher. At this point, I recognized that I was significantly high. The only time I had been similarly affected was when we consumed 15 mg instead of our usual 5-10 mg, which had led to an intense experience filled with waves of sensations, ironically, while at the beach. After a few peaks, I wanted to escape that roller coaster, but it kept on for hours. Thus, I was not thrilled at the prospect of experiencing something similar again. You might be thinking, oh, he probably miscalculated and took 18 mg instead of 8. That would be incorrect. My wife noted my condition and tried to help me navigate through it, drawing upon her vast knowledge as a seasoned veteran. As she attempted to facilitate my recovery, she decided to double-check the packaging, clearly noticing that things were not as expected. 8 mg check. THC check. But wait, why is there a P following the THC? She conducted a quick search to determine what THCP meant. It turns out it stands for tetrahydrocannabidiol, a synthesized form of THC that is 33 times more potent than regular THC. While it is legal in many states, it typically goes unregulated. After calculating, my wife realized we had both ingested the equivalent of 264 Only moments after this realization did the effects hit her, and now I was attempting to support her through it, feeling as though I was approximately 15 minutes ahead of her in this experience. I honestly wish this was the end of it, yet we were merely beginning. We found ourselves in quite the predicament. My wife managed to send a text to our daughter, informing her that we were in a bit of trouble and asking if she could come to retrieve us. I sat there, staring blankly into space. The restaurant had fallen silent for me. The hubbub around us ceased to penetrate my awareness. I occasionally tested my legs, hoping they would respond, but they still felt entirely numb. My wife was starting to feel overwhelmed. She struggled to remove her jacket, deciding instead to take off her shoes, which proved to be a poor choice. Eventually, she ended up lying on the bench, attempting to kick her shoes off. Come to think of it, I felt hot too, but there was no way I was going to move. A woman at the neighboring table leaned over, apologizing. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice. "Is your wife all right?" I attempted to respond. "She's not feeling well." I think that was what came out. This seemed to satisfy her, and she returned to her meal. We had consumed all the water available at the table, which turned out to be fortuitous, as my wife then grabbed one of the cups and vomited into it. I felt a surge of panic because I knew I wouldn't be able to assist in cleaning this up once it overflowed. Incredibly, she managed to fill one cup to the brim, then paused, took the other cup, and started again. I had two thoughts. One, that's disgusting. Why is no one saying anything? Two, that's truly disgusting. I'll just hold this napkin in front of both cups to shield the other patrons from witnessing two clear plastic cups filled with vomit. This is how our daughter discovered us, me holding a napkin in front of 2 cups of vomit and my wife lying on the bench, trying to take her shoes off. "Is that?" she asked, eyeing the cups. I managed a nod. She quietly disposed of the cups, I have no knowledge of where or how, and requested a glass of water from the staff. "Oh, you're with them," they told her, which she would later share with us. She indicated that it was time for us to leave. My legs still felt unresponsive, but seemed like they might cooperate if pressed into action, so we followed her back to the apartment a few blocks away, resembling 2 large, stoned ducks trailing after a duckling. I recall being captivated by the stares and the feeling of air. My wife, wearing her long-sleeved shirt over her jacket, appeared overly enthusiastic about everything. The next few moments are a haze. I know I ended up in my daughter's bathroom, but I have no concept of how long I was there. All I could do was prop myself up against the sink. I pondered whether this was what mental illness felt like, and if I was forever trapped in this state. I kept moving my legs up and down to ensure they were still functional. There was a great deal of vomiting and sweating. My wife had collapsed on the spare mattress that our daughter had prepared for us. Eventually, I emerged and managed to reach the hallway between the bathroom and the living room, declaring it the best spot for me, so I lay down there. I was whimpering about how this couldn't possibly be reality and expressed concern that we were being recorded and would be uploaded online the next day. Our daughter, exasperated by the situation, decided to take a walk. I remember her stepping over me in the hallway as she left. It felt both tragic and humorously absurd. I crawled to the couch next to the mattress. Neither of us could sleep. At some point, my wife got up, vomited in the bathroom, brushed her teeth, and returned to bed. She thought an Altoid might help alleviate the situation. I heard the rustling of cellophane and mistook it for a rat making an attempt to attack her face, prompting me to leap from the couch and start flailing my shoe on the floor. She managed to assure me it was not a rat. I crawled back to the couch and lost consciousness. The following morning was excruciating. We were scheduled to attend a high school reunion that evening, but we could barely muster the energy to function. We finally managed to leave the house around noon. I felt an overpowering anxiety that the locals from the diner might spot us, leading to our expulsion from town. I couldn't believe we weren't incarcerated. I couldn't fathom how only one person addressed us throughout our time in the diner, particularly after the vomiting incident. How did no one notice? How were we not headlines? My wife took a photo of me from that afternoon while I sat at a booth waiting for food at an entirely different restaurant, naturally, and I don't think I have ever looked so worn out. Ultimately, we returned to my parents' home, completely bypassing the reunion. We flew back home the next day, but the effects of our weed hangover lingered for several days. Summary: we mistakenly purchased THCP edibles, believing they contained THC. THCP is 33 times stronger. We each consumed the equivalent of 264 mg of THC. We had a green out episode while dining in a diner in our dot. Story 3. I got fired after uncovering my boss's fraud, then lured him into a fake job offer in Europe, leaving him with nothing but regret. This occurred during the final stages of the analog era in the mid-1990s. Fax machines, Federal Express, dial-up internet access, and voicemail were the primary tools used in business. At that time, I was a youthful regional sales manager for a well-known consumer brand. I was responsible for the grocery trade across 11 Western states. My division operated from Chicago, while I maintained a home office on the West Coast. I built my reputation by consistently meeting my sales quotas and adhering to budget constraints. I would often be reassigned to underperforming markets, and more often than not, I would still meet my sales targets. It wasn't anything extraordinary. I simply identified the greatest opportunities and focused my efforts there. Back then, we had something referred to as market development funds, abbreviated as MDF, which we jokingly called making days fun. Before such practices were deemed illegal, it was money we could use for nearly any purpose you could think of: entertaining clients, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, or taking them on market research trips. I once took 6 executives for a weekend fishing trip in Mexico. As long as we had the receipts and our supervisors were informed, unless they specifically requested not to know, we could spend the funds as we wanted. This was reminiscent of the old-school Mad Men-style slush funds, all of which were tax-deductible. Typically, the MDF amounted to 2% of annual gross sales and operated on a use-it-or-lose-it basis, meaning it had to be spent or it would not carry over. I often had leftover funds. Being a team player, I would inform my boss, Sasquatch, so he could utilize it as well. It was not a significant issue. As the year drew to a close, my weekly Federal Express package from the company began to include approvals for payments to a supplier I had never encountered before. What struck me as odd was that they were for a demonstration company that was not one of my regional suppliers. If you have ever been offered a sample or coupon in a grocery store, that was a demonstration company. I reached out to the broker agent in that market and discovered they had neither used nor heard of the company. I eventually realized that the payments were from Sasquatch, who had included them with my other approvals. I called him and inquired if he recognized what they were for. He stated that they should be charged to my MDF and told me not to be concerned. This was somewhat irregular, as demonstrations were normally funded from other sources or directed by marketing. Regardless, I signed off on them. As things progressed, I was summoned to headquarters for a meeting, during which I was informed of my transfer to a market I had never worked in and that relocation would be necessary. At that point, my wife was expecting, and we had just embarked on a significant renovation of our newly purchased home. Though the company offered some relocation benefits, it was too overwhelming to uproot and move to the southeast. I refused the offer and was then informed that I could either seek another position within the company or accept a severance package. I ultimately chose the severance. Several months later, a former colleague informed me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's previous associates, whom he arranged to have hired in my place, and that the region was failing miserably. It made no sense. Why was I let go only to be succeeded by someone who resided in a different city and was incapable of handling the role? I began to wonder if my naivety had led me to inadvertently mark myself as a target. After conducting some research and investigation, which was significantly more challenging before the internet, I discovered that the demonstration company, billing the MDF, was located in my ex-boss's former city and operated out of a post office box, a phone line, and a doing business as registration created by the new person in my job. I later learned that it was his girlfriend mistress. I was enraged. Like many individuals, I often fantasize about seeking revenge in my mind but rarely follow through. Most of the time, it serves as a coping mechanism rather than being truly effective in moving past the offense. However, this situation was so outrageous, so unwarranted, and so disruptive to my life that I felt compelled to retaliate. My plan evolved to take this individual down. No matter how long it took or the costs involved, I was determined to ensure this person faced consequences. While I could have reported him to the company, they might have dismissed my claims as those of a disgruntled former employee looking to settle a score. I resolved to approach him as a faux recruiter, not merely someone gathering resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone compensated to recruit talent for high-level positions. I had spent a year early in my career at a highly selective headhunting firm, and I was well-versed in the intricacies of the process. My deception required international communications, fraudulent letterhead, feigned British accents, and overseas connections to carry out my scheme. Sasquatch was captivated by luxurious watches and golf. He played regularly and was an avid viewer of professional golf both on television and in person. He would endlessly discuss these topics. To entice him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive role with a prestigious Swiss watch company linked to professional golf, and other upscale sports sponsorships, which included an attractive benefits package. The position would entail socializing with key sports organizers, traveling around the globe, first class, of course, and essentially spending funds. It was a career he could only dream of. In the slow and deliberate long con, I led him on until the moment was ripe to close with an offer. The only stipulation was that he needed to report to Switzerland for the final offer and onboarding process. I deliberately scheduled it during the division meetings at his previous job, which were compulsory and hard to miss without raising suspicions. Sasquatch was concerned that his absence would be difficult to justify, especially if he was overseas. The headhunting firm communicated that they could move the appointment to a few days earlier, allowing him to attend his meeting, but he would need to purchase a fully refundable business class ticket and arrange his own accommodations. "Keep your receipts," he was told, and the watch company would reimburse him. Sasquatch arrived at his luxurious hotel suite, paying for the expensive room with his own credit card, only to receive a message from the watch company stating that his meeting had to be postponed to the following Monday due to a significant corporate crisis. In a panic, Sasquatch contacted the faux recruiter, expressing concern about missing corporate meetings back in the United States. They agreed that he would call in sick and that regardless of what transpired with his former position, he was headed to much more rewarding opportunities. Enjoy your weekend in Europe, as by Monday, you will be in your dream role. While Sasquatch was enjoying himself in Europe, I nonchalantly reached out to his supervisor, the division president, and casually asked for a reference regarding Sasquatch's work ethic and employment dates. You would be surprised at how frequently this kind of mix-up occurs. To his credit, the president did not reveal any surprise or indicate anything unusual about the call, but like a good corporate representative, he directed me to human resources. I inadvertently mentioned that Sasquatch was in Europe finalizing his new job and that he had already notified the company of his departure. My mistake. As the situation unfolded, I pieced together the aftermath from former colleagues and contacts in the industry who were unaware of my involvement. When Monday arrived and Sasquatch failed to show up, he must have been frantic. This assumption follows since we severed all communications to let him twist in uncertainty, as we received at least 20 calls to the office and numerous faxes. Sasquatch lingered at the hotel for a day or two before ultimately deciding to head home. At some point, he likely contacted the watch company, but I never verified that. Upon his return home, he discovered his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR representative met him at an off-site location to deliver his severance package and reclaim the vehicle and other company property. I later heard that his wife left him, and his mistress was terminated for theft. I estimate he spent at least $10,000 on travel and accommodations. I wish I could proclaim that I disclosed my role in his downfall to Sasquatch, but it served no beneficial purpose and might have exposed me to unwanted retaliation. By my moral compass, I achieved justice against a thief who was unashamed to pilfer from me and jeopardize my livelihood. That was more than sufficient. Never forget an offense. I am genuinely humbled by the attention this story has received. I have been criticized for having a heart of stone towards those who have wronged me. I admit there were instances where my revenge plans either backfired or were never executed. I tend to be combative and am self-assured enough to withstand a few random criticisms and healthy skepticism from online users. I defend myself with the hope that my experiences can impart a lesson on the occasions when revenge is warranted. My real-life experiences predate the internet, public exposure, emotional distancing, texting, social media, Google, and all the other factors that lead people to believe everything is a scam. I have had some enjoyable and memorable moments in my life. The account of Sasquatch is true and less complex than one might assume. The essence of any confidence scheme, the term con originates from confidence, is the trust that the target places in the con artist. Sasquatch was a fanatical collector of Swiss watches. He owned costly models and was knowledgeable about rare timepieces and their intricacies. Additionally, he was passionate about golf, participated in the sport, and consumed any related media. Therefore, when my real recruiter contact from the United Kingdom approached him with the proposition that My Swiss client is confidentially seeking to establish a hospitality ambassador position in the United States, looking for someone who understands golf and other sports, is knowledgeable about watches, and is at ease with high-profile interactions at a six-figure salary, coupled with an extensive travel allowance, car, entertainment perks, and access to premier watches in the world, along with a budget to assemble a small team. Do you think it would have been challenging for him to entice Sasquatch? A few faxes from a third party, a handful of phone calls, and some improvised letterhead, and he was hooked. If Sasquatch had harbored any doubts regarding the legitimacy, he undoubtedly would have refused to cover travel expenses. I have personally fronted travel costs during interviews, so it wasn't an unreasonable expectation. I will say that revenge is not always a gratifying experience, and at times, I find it somewhat nauseating. Such actions inevitably have consequences. As I get older, I tend to agree, to some extent, that living well is the best revenge, but only after ensuring that someone faces accountability for their actions. Story 4. Dating my high school sweetheart for nearly 4 years, I question our future as I'm set to pursue my dreams far away, and he's not. Hello, Reddit. I am an 18-year-old non-binary individual currently facing some challenges with my boyfriend, who is also 18 years old. I'm feeling uncertain about how to handle the situation, which is something I cannot resolve on my own. I kindly ask that you refrain from criticizing my aspirations or feelings, as they are beyond my control. This is a lengthy post, but I genuinely need some feedback. To provide some context, we have been in a relationship for nearly 4 years, starting at the conclusion of middle school. He understands me in a way that nobody else does, has been exceptionally supportive, particularly regarding my mental health. I have bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression, and is an incredibly kind person. I cannot even enumerate the wonderful memories we have shared together. Except for a few significant disagreements, less than 3, if I had to estimate, I have never felt unhappy or sensed any toxicity in our relationship. Our communication skills are quite strong, which has contributed to our long-lasting connection, especially for high schoolers. Nevertheless, over the past 6 months, a variety of issues have emerged that are concerning to me, and they appear to be escalating as I approach graduation from high school. My boyfriend graduated earlier this year and is pursuing a career as a musician. His life ambitions include traveling across the country, couch surfing, and creating music. He has decided not to attend college. I will be graduating in May and intend to enroll in a college that is quite distant from my current state. I prefer not to specify, but it is located in the central Midwest. I will categorize my concerns into 4 sections: future aspirations, past issues, advice I've received from others, and my personal feelings about relationships. Regarding future aspirations, I am completely committed to attending a college far away, and I have the opportunity to apply to some excellent institutions due to my academic performance and talents in the arts. I plan to submit applications to roughly half art schools and half traditional colleges. So far, I have been awarded nearly $150,000 in scholarships, so it is unlikely that I will not pursue higher education. Attending art school, especially abroad, has always been a dream of mine. I have applied to several institutions in the United Kingdom, as well as many in the United States, and the more I contemplate it, the more I believe I would regret not studying in the UK. Initially, my boyfriend was supportive of my aspirations. He has no plans for college and hopes to be a traveling musician, expressing an interest in couch surfing and eventually following me wherever I go. He thought, or at least suggested, that my desire to study in another country was exciting. However, about 2 months ago, he changed his demeanor and began to act morose whenever I mentioned relocating abroad, even inventing excuses for me to remain in the United States. At times, he simply stops engaging in conversation altogether. He claims that his reaction is due to fear of missing me, which I can understand, but at the same time, I feel terrible admitting this. I honestly do not care. It frustrates me that he keeps attempting to sway me away from my dreams. I strongly believe that one should not abandon their aspirations for anyone, and it bothers me that he appears to think he is an exception. This level of possessiveness is troubling to me, especially considering the possibility of a long-term commitment. The issues from the past primarily revolve around an embarrassing habit, vaping. I had vaped for some time and quit for about 2 years, right at the beginning of our relationship. I resumed vaping during a challenging phase in my life around a year and a half ago, which greatly distresses my boyfriend. I do not personally see any problem with vaping and did not want to upset him, so I kept it largely to myself. However, whenever he saw me with a vape, he would take it from me and chastise me. There have even been instances where he has thrown one against the wall. He insists it is because he wants me to be healthy, which I understand, but it genuinely upsets me. He has taken approximately $60 worth of vaping devices from me without returning any money. The last time this occurred, I clarified that I do intend to quit and that it is not easy to stop abruptly. I plan to gradually reduce my nicotine intake, and he finally understood. Nonetheless, I feel that I should not have to justify my personal boundaries and remind him that stealing another person's belongings is never acceptable, regardless of how detrimental he believes vaping is. This behavior induces a terrible feeling within me and raises questions about why he feels the need to rescue me. Because of these two factors, I find myself questioning my feelings about this relationship, especially in the context of a long-term commitment. Moving on to the advice I've received from others. I have consulted a variety of friends and adults in my life, including on Reddit and various websites, regarding whether I should consider settling down with my high school sweetheart, something I had once desired, but now find myself reconsidering. Some peers my age have mentioned that love is sufficient, but nearly all the adults in my life have strongly advised against it based on their experiences or those of others. They stress that it is crucial to take advantage of one's late teens and early 20s to grow and explore independently. I have also wondered if I would regret not experiencing this stage of young adulthood for myself. The more I reflect on it, the more I realize I would indeed feel regretful. I am not inclined to dedicate this period of my life solely to one person, especially considering the opinions of trusted adults in my life, including my therapists and teachers. The general consensus among articles and Reddit posts suggests the same sentiment regarding personal exploration during this stage of life. This perspective has led me to question whether I am genuinely prepared for such a long-term commitment, contributing to my recent feelings of emotional distance from him. Finally, I have my own emotions and beliefs about relationships. I have always identified as fluid regarding my sexuality and gender identity. I am bisexual and non-binary, and recently I have been contemplating the idea of polyamory or non-monogamy. I brought this hypothetical idea to my boyfriend, clarifying that I was not proposing to pursue this immediately, and he appeared open to the concept, even suggesting he could envision such a situation occurring. He has a close friend in a non-monogamous relationship, so he understands that this can be an orientation. Initially, I was nervous about discussing it, but his response reassured me. However, he later changed his stance, indicating that if I desired to explore relationships with others, we would have to break up immediately. This caught me off guard and left me feeling disheartened, especially since I was merely discussing a hypothetical scenario. The most difficult part, and I feel terrible admitting this, is that I have developed a significant crush on someone else, which I believe is tied to my feelings of disconnection and dissatisfaction in my current relationship. I have had minor crushes during our time together, which I consider normal, as they typically only last about a week. However, this particular crush has intensified over the past month, and I am genuinely worried about it. It feels wrong to be attracted to someone else while in a relationship, almost as if I am betraying my boyfriend, yet I have never actively pursued any relationship with this individual, as I do not believe in that kind of behavior while committed to another person. I spend considerably more time with my boyfriend than with this other person. This situation makes me feel as though I am coping unhealthily and indicates that I might be emotionally detached from my current relationship. What a lengthy post. In summary, I am truly uncertain about whether I should break up with him or attempt to make our relationship work in the long term. I love him immensely. However, I firmly believe in pursuing my goals. The interpersonal challenges are resolvable, but my college plans and the concept of settling down with a high school sweetheart will not disappear. I am also considering that if I decide to end the relationship, it would be best to do so after our 4 years together. Any help would be greatly appreciated.